Hello everyone and welcome. I'm excited to kick off today's presentation on ecosystems. Today, we'll explore the fascinating world of ecosystems, their components, and how they function together. We'll also look at their importance and the impact they have on our environment. So let's get started and dive into this intriguing topic. So as we wrap up, let's briefly revisit some of the key concepts we've covered in this presentation. First, the conclusion ties together all the ideas we've discussed about ecosystems and their functions. Moving back to nutrient cycling, or biogeochemical cycling, this process is crucial because it describes how essential elements move through living organisms and the environment, maintaining the balance necessary for life. Next, we looked at the ecological pyramid, which helps us understand the flow of energy and matter through different levels in an ecosystem. The food chain and food web illustrate these connections, how energy and nutrients pass from producers to consumers and decomposers. Speaking of decomposers, they play a vital role in breaking down organic material, which links directly to the processes of decomposition and how factors like temperature and moisture affect the rate at which this happens. We also explored major ecosystem functions, including productivity, the rate at which plants produce biomass, and the importance of producers, consumers, and decomposers in maintaining ecosystem health. Understanding the structure of ecosystems, from stratification in aquatic systems to the different types of ecosystems, terrestrial and aquatic, helps us see the diversity of life and how different environments function. We examined succession, including xerarch and hydrarch succession, which describe how ecosystems develop and change over time, leading to stable communities. Energy flow and nutrient cycles, like the phosphorus, carbon, and nitrogen cycles, are fundamental to sustaining life, ensuring nutrients are recycled efficiently. Finally, we touched on ecosystem services, which are the benefits humans derive from healthy ecosystems, such as clean water, air, and resources, highlighting the importance of preserving these natural processes. All these points connect to give us a comprehensive view of how ecosystems function and why their health is vital for our survival and well-being. Let's talk about what an ecosystem really is. Essentially, it's a functional unit of nature, where all the action happens. It's the place where living organisms interact not only with each other, but also with their physical environment. Think of it as a community, a bustling neighborhood, made up of plants, animals, microbes, and the non-living stuff like air, water, and mineral soil. These components don't just coexist, they interact as a system, creating a delicate balance that sustains life. The term ecosystem was actually coined by A.G. Tansley, who was a pioneer in this field. And interestingly, the father of ecosystem ecology is E.P. Odum, who helped us understand these complex interactions better. So, in this presentation, understanding ecosystems helps us see how interconnected everything in nature truly is, which is fundamental to grasping the bigger picture of environmental health and sustainability. Let's talk about the different types of ecosystems. First, saltwater ecosystems include environments like wetlands, estuaries, and marine areas. These are the salty waters you find in oceans and seas, and they support a vast array of marine life. Then we have freshwater ecosystems, which can be categorized into lentic and lotic systems. Lentic ecosystems are still waters like ponds and lakes, where water movement is minimal. Lotic ecosystems, on the other hand, are flowing waters such as rivers and streams. When we classify aquatic ecosystems, we basically divide them into two main types, freshwater and saltwater. Both play crucial roles in supporting biodiversity and providing resources for humans. Moving on, terrestrial ecosystems are those on land, and they include forests, grasslands, deserts, and other land-based environments. These ecosystems are vital for many species and for the services they provide us, like oxygen and food. Now, not all ecosystems are natural. Some are man-made, like crop fields or aquariums. These are artificial ecosystems created or heavily modified by humans to serve specific needs. So, in summary, we have natural ecosystems. both terrestrial and aquatic, and artificial ones that are man-made. Understanding these distinctions helps us appreciate the complexity and importance of each type in maintaining ecological balance. Let's take a closer look at the concept of stratification. As you can see, different species occupy various levels within an ecosystem. Starting from the bottom, we have grass, which forms the ground layer. Above that, there are herbs, which grow a bit taller. Then come the shrubs, which are usually denser and taller. At the top, we find the top trees, which tower over all the other vegetation. This vertical distribution of different species, based on their height and ecological roles, is what we call stratification. It's a crucial concept because it helps us understand how ecosystems are structured and how different plants and animals coexist within these layers. Recognizing these layers allows us to appreciate the complexity and diversity of ecosystems and their importance in maintaining ecological balance. The structure of an ecosystem consists of both biotic and abiotic components. When we talk about biotic components, we're referring to all the living things within the ecosystem: plants, animals, bacteria, and fungi. These organisms interact with each other and with their environment in complex ways that sustain the ecosystem. On the other hand, abiotic components are the non-living elements like sunlight, water, soil, temperature, and air. These factors provide the foundation and conditions necessary for the living organisms to thrive. Understanding how these biotic and abiotic components interact is crucial because it helps us see the ecosystem as an interconnected system where everything depends on everything else. This interconnectedness is what keeps ecosystems balanced and functioning properly, which ties back to our overall theme of understanding the delicate balance within natural environments. Let's take a closer look at the two main types of producers: chemoautotrophs and photoautotrophs. First, all producers are organisms that can synthesize their own food, which makes them the foundation of any ecosystem. When we talk about all the autotrophs in an ecosystem, we're referring to these producers. Green plants are the most familiar example, and they mainly produce food through a process called photosynthesis. This process uses solar energy, sunlight, to convert carbon dioxide and water into glucose and oxygen. So, energy actually enters the ecosystem through these producers, making them crucial for supporting all other life forms. In aquatic ecosystems, phytoplankton play a similar role. They're the primary autotrophs here. Now, there are two main types of producers: photoautotrophs, which use light for energy, and chemoautotrophs, which derive energy from chemical reactions instead of sunlight. Both are essential in different environments, but for most ecosystems, especially terrestrial ones, solar energy captured by photoautotrophs like green plants is the primary energy source. This fundamental process underpins the entire food web, connecting energy flow from the sun to the smallest microbes all the way up to large animals. So on this slide, we're looking at different types of consumers in an ecosystem. We start with the tertiary consumers, which are often called top consumers or apex predators. Think of animals like lions or man, which sit at the top of the food chain. These animals typically feed on secondary consumers, which are themselves carnivores or omnivores. Moving down, we see secondary consumers, such as dogs, cats, or snakes. These animals eat primary consumers and are considered primary carnivores or omnivores. They play an important role in maintaining the balance by controlling the populations of herbivores. Then we come to primary consumers, like cows or rabbits. These are herbivores, they eat plants, and are the first level of consumers that feed on producers like grasses or shrubs. It's important to remember that all heterotrophs, which means all organisms that rely on consuming others for energy, are called consumers. They digest their food inside their bodies, which involves first ingesting the food and then breaking it down through digestion. In short, consumers can be classified into three main types based on their position in the food chain: primary consumers, secondary consumers, and tertiary or top consumers. Each plays a crucial role in the flow of energy through an ecosystem, helping to keep the system balanced and functioning smoothly. Now let's talk about decomposers, which are fascinating organisms in our ecosystem. These are the living organisms that break down the dead bodies of producers and consumers. You might also hear them called reducers, transformers, or osmotrophs. Essentially, they play a crucial role as micro-consumers in our environment. What they do is convert complex organic materials, like dead plant and animal matter, into simpler organic substances. This process is vital because it helps recycle nutrients back into the soil, making them available for new plants to grow. Examples of decomposers include bacteria and fungi, which are incredibly efficient at breaking down organic material. Without decomposers, our ecosystems would be overwhelmed with dead matter, and nutrients wouldn't be recycled effectively. So, in the bigger picture, decomposers are really the unsung heroes that keep the nutrient cycle moving smoothly, ensuring the health and sustainability of all living things around us. Let's take a closer look at some of the major functions of ecosystems. First, nutrient cycling is essential because it involves the movement and exchange of nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus through the environment and living organisms. This process helps maintain the balance necessary for all life forms to thrive. Next, energy flow is a critical concept. Energy from the sun enters the ecosystem through photosynthesis, fueling all other processes. As energy moves through different levels, from plants to herbivores to predators, it gradually diminishes, highlighting the importance of energy transfer efficiency. Decomposition is another key function. It involves the breakdown of dead organic material by decomposers like fungi and bacteria. This process not only recycles nutrients back into the soil, but also keeps ecosystems clean and healthy. Productivity refers to the rate at which plants and other producers generate organic matter through photosynthesis. High productivity indicates a vibrant, productive ecosystem capable of supporting diverse life forms. By understanding these functions, nutrient cycling, energy flow, decomposition, and productivity, we see how ecosystems sustain themselves and support the complex web of life. These processes are interconnected and vital for maintaining ecological balance. Let's talk about productivity, which is essentially the rate at which biomass is produced per unit area over a specific period of time. Think of it as how quickly plants or other organisms generate new material. We measure productivity in terms of weight or energy, which helps us understand the amount of biomass generated. This measurement is really useful because it allows us to compare the productivity levels of different ecosystems. For example, a rainforest might have a much higher productivity than a desert. Understanding productivity helps us grasp how ecosystems function and how energy flows through them, which ties into the overall theme of ecological efficiency and sustainability. Now, let's talk about what primary productivity actually is. It refers to the rate at which organic matter is produced during photosynthesis. In other words, it's how much biomass plants generate over a certain area and time period. When we say GPP, which stands for gross primary productivity, we're referring to the total amount of energy or organic material that plants produce before any is used for their own growth or respiration. This is a crucial concept because it helps us understand the overall energy input into ecosystems. Primary productivity is really the foundation of the food chain, as it determines how much energy is available for herbivores, carnivores, and everything in between. Think of it as the ecosystem's productivity engine, showing us how efficiently plants are converting sunlight into usable energy. In the broader context of our presentation, understanding primary productivity helps us grasp how ecosystems function and how energy flows through them. It's a key piece of the puzzle when we're studying environmental health, sustainability, and the balance of natural resources. All right, let's talk about respiration loss, which is represented by the letter R. This is a crucial concept because it explains why gross primary productivity, or GPP, isn't the same as net primary productivity, or NPP. You see, a significant portion of the energy that plants produce through photosynthesis is used by them in their own respiration processes. So, while GPP measures the total energy captured, not all of that energy is available for growth or other functions. That's where respiration loss comes in. It's the energy plants use to maintain their life processes. When we subtract this respiration loss, R, from GPP, we arrive at NPP, which is the true energy available for plant growth and biomass accumulation. In simple terms, NPP gives us a clearer picture of how much energy is actually available for the ecosystem's development after plants have met their own metabolic needs. This distinction is key for understanding how energy flows through ecosystems and how productive they truly are. So, when we talk about secondary productivity, we're referring to the rate at which consumers, like herbivores and predators, produce new organic matter over a specific period of time. Essentially, it's about how efficiently these organisms convert the food they consume into biomass that can be used for growth and reproduction. This concept is really important because it helps us understand how energy flows through an ecosystem after the primary producers, like plants, have already captured sunlight and produced organic material. By measuring secondary productivity, we can get a clearer picture of how energy is transferred and how ecosystems sustain their populations. It ties into the overall theme because it highlights the dynamic processes that keep ecosystems functioning and productive. Decomposition is a crucial process in ecosystems. It involves the breakdown of dead organic matter, which includes things like fallen leaves, dead plants, and even animals that have decayed. This process is carried out by decomposers, mainly bacteria and fungi. These microorganisms play a vital role because they convert complex organic materials into smaller organic molecules and inorganic substances. This transformation is important because it recycles nutrients back into the soil, making them available for plants to use again. Without decomposition, dead matter would accumulate, and nutrients would become locked away, disrupting the balance of the ecosystem. Connecting this to the overall theme, decomposition ensures the flow of nutrients through the environment, supporting new growth and maintaining ecosystem health. It's a natural, ongoing process that sustains life by recycling essential elements. Let's talk about the raw materials of decomposition, which are essentially dead plants, animals, and even animal feces. These materials are collectively called detritus. Detritus plays a crucial role in ecosystems because it serves as the foundational material that decomposers break down. When we think about nutrient cycling and energy flow, detritus is what fuels the process by providing the organic matter needed for decomposers to thrive. Understanding detritus helps us see how ecosystems recycle nutrients and maintain balance over time. So, in essence, detritus is the starting point for decomposition, which is vital for sustaining healthy, functioning ecosystems. Now, let's talk about animals that feed on decaying organic matter, or detritus. These creatures include earthworms, termites, snails, and a few others. These animals are called detritivores, and they play a crucial role in ecosystems. They help break down dead organic material, turning it into nutrients that plants can use. This process is essential for recycling nutrients and maintaining soil health. So, next time you see earthworms in the soil or termites in a log, remember they're vital players in the ecosystem, helping to keep it balanced by consuming and decomposing organic matter. Decomposers play a crucial role in breaking down detritus by releasing enzymes that decompose organic material into simpler inorganic compounds. This process, known as catabolism, involves the breakdown of complex organic substances into basic inorganic nutrients. One key product of this process is humus, which is degraded further to release essential inorganic substances like carbon dioxide, water, and nutrients such as calcium, magnesium, and potassium. Humus acts as a reservoir of nutrients because of its colloidal nature, meaning it can hold onto nutrients and release them slowly over time. This slow decomposition process is called mineralization. During mineralization, nutrients become available for plants and other organisms, but because humus is highly resistant to microbial action, it decomposes very gradually. Soluble inorganic nutrients, on the other hand, dissolve in water and can leach down through the soil, sometimes precipitating out of solution. Leaching is an important process because it can lead to the loss of nutrients from the soil if they are not retained. Humus itself is a dark, amorphous substance that resists microbial attack, making it a stable form of organic matter. Simplified detritus is gradually converted into humus through a process known as humification, which involves the breakdown of larger particles into smaller ones by detritivores, or decomposers. This process of breaking down detritus into smaller particles is called fragmentation, and it's a vital first step in decomposition. Overall, these steps, fragmentation, humification, and mineralization, are all interconnected and essential for cycling nutrients back into the ecosystem, maintaining soil fertility and supporting plant growth. Let's talk about how environmental conditions influence decomposition. Warm and moist environments tend to accelerate the process because they create ideal conditions for microbes and decomposers to thrive. On the other hand, low temperatures and anaerobic conditions, where oxygen is scarce, tend to slow down or even inhibit decomposition. Moving on to the chemical composition of the detritus, the rate of decomposition is also affected by what the material is made of. For example, if the detritus is rich in lignin and chitin, which are tough and resistant compounds, decomposition happens more slowly. Conversely, when the material contains more nitrogen and water-soluble substances like sugars, decomposition speeds up because these elements are easier for microbes to break down and utilize. So overall, both climatic conditions and the chemical makeup of the organic material play crucial roles in determining how quickly decomposition occurs, which is essential for understanding nutrient cycling and ecosystem dynamics. Now, let's take a closer look at the parasitic food chain, or PFC. A food chain, in general, describes how energy or food moves from one organism to another, starting with the producer, like plants, and passing through various consumers. It's a way to visualize the flow of energy within an ecosystem. Each step in this chain is called a trophic level, which helps us understand the different roles organisms play in transferring energy. Recognizing these levels is crucial because it shows us how energy diminishes as it moves up the chain, impacting the entire ecosystem's stability and health. This concept ties into our overall discussion of ecosystem dynamics and the importance of each organism's role in maintaining balance. Let's take a closer look at saprophytes. These are organisms like fungi and bacteria that serve as decomposers, breaking down dead organic material and recycling nutrients back into the ecosystem. They play a crucial role in maintaining the health of the environment by feeding on detritus, which is essentially the waste and dead matter from other organisms. Now, when we think about how energy flows through different parts of an ecosystem, one important concept is the detritus food chain, or DFC. This chain begins with dead organic matter. So, it's the pathway through which nutrients and energy are transferred from decaying material to other organisms that feed on it. On the other hand, there's the grazing food chain, or GFC. This one starts with producers, like plants or algae, that create their own food through photosynthesis. From there, herbivores consume these producers, and energy moves along the chain through different levels of consumers. Understanding these two types of food chains, the detritus food chain and the grazing food chain, helps us see the diverse ways energy and nutrients circulate within ecosystems. Both are essential for maintaining ecological balance, and recognizing how they function together gives us a broader picture of ecosystem dynamics. Now, let's talk about each step of the food chain, which we call a trophic level. In any ecosystem, there are typically 4 trophic levels. These levels represent the different positions that organisms occupy within the food chain. One key point to remember is that as energy flows from one level to the next, it decreases. This means that the amount of energy available at each subsequent level is less than the level before it. This decrease in energy is why we usually see only a few trophic levels in an ecosystem. Understanding these levels helps us see how energy moves through the environment and why certain organisms are more abundant than others. It's a fundamental concept that ties directly into how ecosystems function and maintain balance. Let's talk about the concept of standing crop. This refers to the amount of living material present at a specific time within a particular area. It can be measured in terms of biomass, which is the total mass of living organisms, or simply by counting the number of organisms in that area. Now, if we look at the trophic levels, the first level, the producers, typically have the largest standing crop, often set as 100%. These are the plants and other photosynthetic organisms that form the base of the food chain. Moving up to the second level, the primary consumers, like herbivores, usually have much less biomass, around 10% of the producers. This drop reflects how energy and biomass are transferred and diminished through each level. At the third level, secondary consumers, which are the carnivores that eat herbivores, have even less, roughly 1%. And at the top, the apex predators or top consumers, their standing crop might be as little as 0.1%. This decreasing pattern highlights a key point in ecology. Energy transfer between trophic levels is quite inefficient, leading to much smaller populations and biomass as you move higher up. Understanding standing crop helps us visualize how energy flows and why ecosystems have a certain structure. It ties directly into the overall theme of energy transfer and sustainability within ecological systems. The natural interconnection of food chains forms a web called a food web. This concept highlights how different plants and animals are connected through feeding relationships in an ecosystem. Instead of thinking of a single chain, imagine many chains overlapping and intertwining. This creates a complex network. The food web shows us how energy flows through an ecosystem, with each organism playing a role. Understanding food webs helps us see the bigger picture of how ecosystems stay balanced and resilient. It emphasizes the importance of each species, because if one part of the web is disrupted, it can affect many others. So, as we look at ecosystems, remember that they're all interconnected, much like a web, each strand supporting the whole. Now, let's talk about energy flow. The storage, expenditure, and transformation of energy are all governed by two fundamental laws of thermodynamics. These laws help us understand how energy moves through systems and why certain processes happen the way they do. The first law, often called the law of conservation of energy, tells us that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transferred or transformed. So, energy flows from one form or place to another, but the total amount stays the same. The second law introduces the idea of entropy, which basically means that energy tends to spread out or become less useful over time. This is why some energy always disperses as heat, making perfect efficiency impossible. Together, these laws shape the way energy flows in natural systems and our engineered processes, highlighting the importance of understanding these principles as we look at energy management in ecosystems and human activities. Now, let's take a look at this slide, which introduces the concept of ecological pyramids. These are graphical representations that show the distribution of various ecological parameters across different trophic levels in an ecosystem. Essentially, they help us visualize how energy, biomass, or the number of organisms change as we move from producers at the bottom to top consumers at the top. You can think of these pyramids as a way to understand the structure and functioning of an ecosystem. For example, they often reveal that energy decreases as we go up the trophic levels, which makes sense because energy is lost at each step, mainly through heat. Similarly, biomass and the number of organisms tend to decline as we move higher up the pyramid, reflecting the decreasing amount of living material and individuals at each level. These pyramids are powerful tools because they give us a clear, visual understanding of ecological dynamics. They also emphasize the importance of conserving producers and lower trophic levels, since they support the entire ecosystem. Overall, ecological pyramids are fundamental to understanding energy flow and the organization of life within ecosystems. tying directly into our broader discussion of ecosystem health and sustainability. In most ecosystems, you'll notice that all three types of pyramids, number, energy, and biomass, are typically upright. This means they have a broad base that gradually narrows as you move up the trophic levels. The relationship described by these pyramids can be expressed in terms of the number of organisms, the amount of energy, or the total biomass present at each level. No matter which aspect you're focusing on, the overall shape remains quite similar. At the bottom of the pyramid, we have the producers. These are usually plants or algae that generate energy through photosynthesis. The apex of the pyramid is occupied by the top consumer, the organism at the highest trophic level, with other consumers and herbivores in between. You can think of the pyramid as broad at the bottom, where there's a large number of producers, and then narrowing as you go higher, because fewer organisms or less energy are available at each successive level. This visual structure helps us understand how energy and biomass flow through an ecosystem, emphasizing the efficiency and transfer of energy from one level to the next. Let's talk about the pyramid of number in a tree ecosystem, and you'll notice it's inverted. This means that there are fewer organisms at the base, like trees, and more at the top, such as insects or birds. Now, in the sea, the pyramid of biomass is also inverted. This might seem counterintuitive at first, but it happens because the biomass of fishes can be greater than that of the phytoplankton they feed on, especially when considering the total biomass over time. However, one thing that remains consistent across all ecosystems is the pyramid of energy. No matter what, it is always upright. This is because, as energy flows from one trophic level to the next, some of that energy is always lost as heat at each step. So, unlike number or biomass, energy pyramids never invert. Understanding these differences helps us grasp the unique dynamics in various ecosystems and highlights why energy transfer is always a one-way process, decreasing as it moves up the food chain. Let's talk about some limitations of ecological pyramids. First, they do not include saprophytes, which are organisms like fungi and bacteria that decompose organic matter. These play a crucial role in ecosystems, but because pyramids don't account for them, we miss an important part of the energy and nutrient flow. Next, ecological pyramids don't really accommodate a food web structure, which is often more complex than a simple linear chain. Food webs involve multiple, interconnected feeding relationships, and pyramids tend to oversimplify that complexity. Finally, they have a limitation in that they don't consider the fact that the same species can sometimes belong to two or more trophic levels. For example, a carnivore might also eat plants at certain times, or herbivores might have omnivorous tendencies. This overlap isn't captured in the traditional pyramid model. So, overall, while ecological pyramids are useful, it's important to recognize these limitations when we're analyzing ecosystem dynamics. The development of a plant community on a barren area is what we call ecological succession, or biotic succession. Essentially, it's a process where the species composition of an area changes gradually and predictably over time. This means that as conditions evolve, different plants and animals move in, replace each other, and shape the ecosystem. One important thing to remember is that biotic communities are never truly stable. They are always changing in some way. This ongoing change is a fundamental part of how ecosystems develop and adapt, connecting to the broader theme of how nature continuously evolves and maintains balance. The first species that invade a bare area are known as pioneer species. These are the initial organisms to colonize an environment that has little to no life, such as after a volcanic eruption or a landslide. They play a crucial role in ecological succession because they prepare the environment for later, more complex species. Pioneer species are typically hardy and adaptable, able to survive in harsh conditions with minimal resources. They often include lichens, mosses, and certain grasses. By breaking down rocks and increasing soil nutrients, they help create a more hospitable environment for other plants and animals to follow. Understanding pioneer species is key to grasping how ecosystems recover and evolve over time. Their presence marks the beginning of a gradual process of ecological succession, leading to a more stable and diverse ecosystem. This slide highlights the concept of the last and most stable community in a given area, often referred to as the climax community. Climax species are the dominant plants or organisms that establish themselves during the final stages of ecological succession. These species tend to be well adapted to the local environment and can maintain stability over long periods. Essentially, they form the backbone of the ecosystem, providing stability and continuity. Recognizing these climax species helps us understand how ecosystems reach a state of equilibrium. Throughout our discussion on succession, we've seen how communities evolve and eventually stabilize, and this slide emphasizes the importance of these climax species in maintaining ecological balance over time. In succession, the stages that come between the pioneer community and the climax community are known as transitional or seral communities. These are essentially the intermediate communities that develop as an ecosystem progresses towards its final, stable state. When we talk about seral stages, we're referring to the different phases an ecosystem goes through during succession. Each stage has its own unique characteristics and species composition, gradually changing as the environment becomes more complex and stable. Recognizing these stages helps us understand how ecosystems recover and evolve over time, which is a key part of grasping the bigger picture of ecological succession and community development. As we look at this slide, let's focus on the changes that occur during ecological succession. First, we see the change in the number and types of animals and decomposers. Over time, the variety of species increases, which reflects a richer and more complex ecosystem. This leads us to the concept of increased species diversity, meaning more kinds of plants, animals, and microorganisms are present as succession progresses. Next, we encounter the idea of parallel evolution, where different species evolve similar traits independently, often due to similar environmental pressures. This process highlights how ecosystems can develop in similar ways, even in different locations. We also observe the continuous change towards stability. Succession isn't static. It's a dynamic process where ecosystems gradually become more stable and resilient over time. This constant adjustment is crucial for the development of a mature ecosystem. However, an important point to note is the decrease in net productivity. As succession advances, the rate at which energy is converted into biomass can decline, especially as the system reaches a more balanced state. Finally, we see the concept of gradual replacement, where earlier species are slowly replaced by more dominant, better adapted species. All these characteristics, changing species composition, increasing diversity, parallel evolution, ongoing stabilization, and species replacement, are fundamental to understanding the process of succession. They demonstrate how ecosystems evolve towards a more stable and mature state, reflecting the overall theme of ecological development and resilience. Let's talk about unfavorable conditions and what they mean for ecological succession. Unfavorable conditions are environments that hinder the growth or survival of certain species, making it difficult for a community to thrive. These conditions can be caused by various factors, including physiological challenges faced by organisms. For example, extreme temperatures, lack of water, or poor soil quality can all create physiological stress that prevents certain species from establishing themselves. Now, despite these unfavorable conditions, they can also be viewed as opportunities for change. They set the stage for the next community to develop, often favoring species that are better adapted to survive under tough circumstances. This is where biotic factors come into play, influencing how succession proceeds over time. Biotic factors include interactions among living organisms, such as competition, predation, and mutualism, that can either hinder or promote the progression of succession. And this process of change, what causes succession, is driven largely by these physiological and biotic factors working together. When conditions are unfavorable, they often trigger a shift, paving the way for new communities better suited to the environment. So, in essence, Unfavorable conditions act as catalysts, shaping the future composition of an ecosystem by challenging existing communities and encouraging the emergence of new, more adapted ones. Now, let's talk about the different types of succession. First, we have secondary succession. This occurs in areas where vegetation was previously present but has been destroyed, either by natural events like fires or floods, or by human activities. It's like Mother Nature's way of healing and restoring an ecosystem after a disturbance. The key point here is that because soil and some living organisms are still present, this process tends to happen faster than primary succession. Next, we have primary succession. This starts in places where no life existed before, such as on volcanic lava or landslides where the ground is essentially bare. In these cases, life has to begin from scratch, and it's a much slower process. Over time, life gradually establishes itself, building up soil and creating new ecosystems from nothing. Understanding these two types helps us see how ecosystems recover and evolve after different kinds of disturbances, which ties back into the overall theme of how nature adapts and regenerates over time. Let's walk through the stages of hydrosor or hydrarch succession that occur in a newly formed lake or pond. We start with the pioneer community, which consists of tiny autotrophic organisms that produce organic matter. An example of this is cyanobacteria. These microorganisms are crucial because they kickstart the process by forming the base of the food chain. As succession progresses, we move to the phytoplankton stages, where free-floating plants like nymphea or water lilies become dominant. These plants float on or just below the water surface and begin to shade the water, impacting light penetration. Next, we see the rooted submerged stages, exemplified by plants like Vallisneria. These plants take root in the sediment and grow underwater, providing habitat and oxygen for aquatic life. Following that, there are the reed swamp stages, which are amphibious stages. Here, reeds and similar plants form dense stands in the marshy areas, gradually transforming the aquatic environment. Moving into the sedge meadow stage, woody shrubs start to appear. These plants further stabilize the soil and start to create a more terrestrial environment. Finally, in the forest stage, trees dominate. Over time, the area becomes a forest, with woody shrubs giving way to larger trees, completing the process of succession. This entire sequence illustrates how aquatic ecosystems evolve into terrestrial ecosystems, reflecting the dynamic and gradual nature of ecological succession. Now let's take a look at the different stages of succession that occur on rocks, which is known as litho or xerarch succession. It begins with the xerarch succession, where life starts on bare rocks. Initially, you'll see the forest stage, which is quite advanced, but right at the start, we have the herb stages. These are small, pioneer plants like herbs and grasses that begin the process of soil formation. Next come the shrub stage, where shrubs start to establish themselves, providing more organic matter. Then, we see the moss stages, which are crucial because mosses help retain moisture and further break down rocks. Moving forward, we encounter the foliose lichen stages. These are large lichens with leafy, flat bodies called thalli, and they play a vital role in creating organic material on the bare surface. Following that, we get to the crustose lichen stages. These lichens form a crust-like layer tightly attached to the rock surface, and they're often considered the pioneer community. Interestingly, they produce organic acids that chemically weather the rocks, helping to create the soil necessary for subsequent plant growth. So, in essence, this succession from lichens to mosses, shrubs, herbs, and eventually forest reflects how life gradually transforms a barren rocky environment into a more stable, thriving ecosystem. It's a fascinating process that highlights nature's resilience and ability to adapt and develop over time. Let's talk about nutrient cycles, or ecological recycling, which is really the way organic and inorganic matter move and get exchanged back into the production of living things. This process is driven by food web pathways, which break down matter into mineral nutrients that plants and other organisms can use. These cycles happen within ecosystems, which are interconnected systems where matter and energy flow through organisms feeding, digesting, and migrating. You'll notice that minerals and nutrients don't distribute evenly. They tend to accumulate in different densities and patterns throughout these systems. Understanding nutrient cycling helps us see how ecosystems sustain life by constantly recycling essential nutrients, maintaining balance, and supporting the interconnected web of life that we see across different environments. Let's look at some examples of nutrient cycles. For instance, the sulfur cycle, which primarily involves the movement of sulfur through different parts of the environment. This cycle has its main nutrient reservoir in the Earth's crust, meaning that sulfur is stored there and moves through various processes like weathering and mineralization. Now, moving on to the sedimentary cycle, which includes cycles like the carbon cycle and the nitrogen cycle. These are examples of cycles where the nutrient reservoirs are mostly in the atmosphere, such as carbon dioxide and nitrogen gas. These cycles are crucial because they help regulate the levels of these gases in the atmosphere and ensure their availability for living organisms. Finally, when we talk about the types of cycles, it's important to understand that some nutrients are stored mainly in the Earth's crust, like sulfur, while others are stored in the atmosphere, like carbon and nitrogen. Recognizing these differences helps us understand how nutrients move and cycle through different parts of our planet, which is fundamental to our overall understanding of ecosystem dynamics and environmental health. Carbon makes up about 49% of the dry weight of all living organisms, which really highlights how essential it is to life on Earth. Interestingly, only a tiny fraction of CO2, just about 0.003%, is found in the atmosphere. But even in such small amounts, carbon plays a crucial role in the Earth's carbon cycle. The process of fixing carbon in the biosphere mainly happens through photosynthesis, where plants and other photosynthetic organisms absorb CO2 from the atmosphere and convert it into organic compounds. This is how carbon gets incorporated into living tissues. Now, carbon doesn't stay locked away forever. It returns to the atmosphere through the respiratory activities of both producers, like plants, and consumers, such as animals. When they respire, they release CO2 back into the air. Decomposers also contribute. They break down dead organic matter, which releases additional CO2. And there are other ways carbon is released into the atmosphere. Burning wood or biomass fires, forest fires, the combustion of organic matter, fossil fuel burning, and volcanic activity all release significant amounts of CO2. These processes are critical to understanding how carbon cycles through our planet. All these points connect to the bigger picture of how vital the carbon cycle is for maintaining the balance of life and climate on Earth. Phosphorus is a major component of living organisms, and it plays a crucial role in many biological processes. You'll find it in nucleic acids, which are essential for genetic information, and in cellular energy transfer systems like ATP, the molecule that powers most of our cellular activities. Many animals also require large amounts of phosphorus to build shells, bones, and teeth, highlighting its importance across different species. Now, the natural source of phosphorus is primarily rocks, where it exists as phosphates. When these rocks undergo weathering, tiny amounts of phosphates dissolve into the soil, becoming available for plant absorption. Plants take up these phosphates through their roots, and then herbivores and other animals obtain phosphorus by consuming these plants. Finally, when organisms die or produce waste, bacteria play a vital role by breaking down these materials. Phosphate-solubilizing bacteria decompose organic matter and release phosphorus back into the soil in a form that plants can reabsorb, completing the cycle. This phosphorus cycle is essential for maintaining the availability of this element in ecosystems, supporting life at every level. Now, let's talk about the many benefits that forest ecosystems provide beyond just their physical presence. They also give us aesthetic, cultural, and spiritual values that enrich our lives and connect us to nature in meaningful ways. Additionally, forests serve as vital storage sites for carbon, helping to regulate our climate by absorbing greenhouse gases. They offer essential habitats for wildlife, supporting biodiversity and maintaining healthy ecosystems. Forests are also key players in nutrient cycling, which generates fertile soils necessary for plant growth and agriculture. Moreover, they help prevent natural disasters like droughts and floods by stabilizing water flow and maintaining the water cycle. Finally, forests act as natural purifiers, cleaning our air and water. All these benefits stem from the natural processes occurring within ecosystems, which we refer to as ecosystem services. These services are crucial for our well-being and the health of our planet, highlighting the importance of protecting these vital natural resources. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. To wrap up, I want to emphasize the key points we've discussed. First, we've explored the main concepts thoroughly, making sure we understand their significance and how they connect to our overall goals. Second, I highlighted the most important ideas that can truly make a difference in our work moving forward. And finally, I aim to link everything back to the big picture, showing how each piece fits into the broader theme of growth and innovation. I hope this session has been both insightful and inspiring. Thank you again for being such an engaged audience.